Dear subscribers, as you know, we shared many information for you, and we are studying very hard to find current news for you. However, I cannot use this channel for future. Please follow our new channel called as Daily News Report and watch our video to support us. Link in description. Also, you can reach the video we shared on Daily News Report by clicking on the top right button. We highly recommend watching, subscribing, and sharing. We will continue to share some news on this channel, but we take precautions against some situations for future. Thank you for supporting us.
The market understands that the Federal Reserve will stay out of the way for the foreseeable future. There was probably a lot of short covering at that particular time, pushed the market where it is now. We're very close to all-time highs on the major indices, and that's interesting. I think once again the market, the probability is that we're at another top. Last May, I had said that we were at the top in the Dow. I called that almost to the day. That video can be seen on my my website, on my YouTube channel, I mean. And I think we're there again. I can't imagine what's going to push this market much higher. From where we are, we got abysmal earnings coming in here, multiples on this market that cannot be justified. We have a Federal Reserve who continues to create distortions across the spectrum of asset class. Nothing is real because of their interest rate suppression scheme. Everything prices off of the debt market, as you're aware. So, I think the market might be toppy here. Also, we have to look at the seasonality. End of April is usually weak for the market. We got May coming up, sell May, go away. I think that might play out here. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next several trading days. I mean, everybody already knows I'm short this market. I bought puts on SPY, August 210 puts last week. They're already paying off. I think if the market remains where it is now, it'll push lower here. I can't imagine again what's going to push it higher unless there's some kind of a scheme out of another world central bank, the Federal Reserve. We heard from a former Fed President Fisher today. He's even worried about bubbles. The stock market is in a bubble, period, being inflated or reinflated by a debt bubble, which is the greatest threat to humankind, period.
Now, you just talked about bubbles. We understand, and many people talk about it with, there's a real estate bubble, there's a derivative bubble. Do you see any of these bubbles getting ready to pop soon?
This is what I think we can rest assured is going to happen here, despite the fact that we do have bubbles all over the place and inverse bubbles being, the root cause of all this is the central bank is distorting asset prices through the mechanism of suppression of interest rates and actually flipping the whole thing upside down, going negative in some parts of the world. Here in the United States, we actually are negative as well. In real terms. But so, I think again that this stock market is getting very, very toppy here. A lot of stuff going on with regard to seasonality, where we may be going. The market can't justify the multiples that we're in right now. We've already seen the action with regard to gold and silver, the bond market. Just today, U.S. 10-year at 1.9. So the market's trying to establish fair value. What people need to understand, once again, is there's no price discovery mechanism here. Nothing is real. I can't stress this enough. I don't care what asset you want to look at, housing, currency, the stock market, metals. There's no true reflection of its value because of, again, the central bank here, the Federal Reserve, is deliberately suppressing interest rates, not allowing the market to determine fair value for this debt. So again, since everything prices off of the debt market, nothing is real. And what that does simply mean, whether it's today, tomorrow, a week, or next year, I have no idea. This will correct to fair value. There is no doubt about this. They can pump, they can do whatever they have to do and want to do to keep it propped up for the short term, however long that short term is going to be. But we know that every single bubble in history has popped before this one without exception, and it will. And it's going to start in the debt market, in my opinion. This is, again, why? Because I believe the debt market is the biggest bubble of them all. It's a mega bubble. It can never be paid back. World central banks continue to fuel it, despite the fact that they know this. Why? Because they want to keep the illusion real, the illusion that there is some type of recovery, the illusion of the stock market. The stock market is an illusion that's being projected onto the public because that's all they know. Oh, the stock market's going higher, so that must mean the economy is doing well. Well, this is absolutely false. So again, this is how they're keeping people in line, keeping them brainwashed. Hey, you know what? My 401k is doing well, but I can promise you that when this thing does correct, see, let me put another perspective on this, Dave, here.
Okay.
The collapse that we're all talking about needs to be understood for what it really is. The collapse is simply the market going to attain, it will attain fair value. So it's not really a collapse. It's going to be simply the market returning itself to doing its sole job, that is to attain fair value for assets. It's going to feel like a collapse because everything is so distorted. But it's not really a quote unquote collapse. It's simply the market doing its sole job to determine fair value for assets across the board. And what that means is people's savings accounts, their 401ks, is all going to just be evaporated because that's not real either. It's all being propped up by this mechanism of world central banks that are determined, at least at this point, to continue to prop it up. It will not last forever. And the collapse is just simply the market attaining fair value.
We see that the stock market, I mean, if you really look at the central bank and all the corporate earnings and the sales of corporations and the layoffs and the unemployment numbers, the market really makes no sense today. It makes no sense of why it continually goes up.
Well, here's the reason why it's continually going up. Let's put a perspective on that real quick. So you have the Federal Reserve suppressing interest rates. Now, what does that mean? Where do investors go? They have nowhere else to go but into the stock market to grow their portfolios. And again, these big institutions, the mega banks, are allowed to borrow cash for nothing practically and speculate. So this is a deliberately created an environment of risk. The environment is risk on. And we've seen this many times in history where the risk on environment becomes a risk off. This is why I tell people to watch the bond market and watch metals right now too, because the bond market, again, is reflecting this risk on environment. Again, the Federal Reserve is suppressing rates, but they can just do so much. At one point, it's going to be the free market that dictates value for everything. So the market now may actually be trying to do that. We're seeing interest rates rise a slight bit. The US 10-year 1.9 today, precious metals going higher, the US dollar under pressure. So they're going to continue to try to prop this up through any and all mechanisms that we can probably think about and things we cannot even dream about at this particular time. Because again, why, Dave? The alternative is too horrible to contemplate. This debt bubble is simply a resource problem. It's not really a financial issue. So if they do not continue to prop up and prop up and prop up, and suppress interest rates and keep things the way they're going, we will run into a resource problem. We will get hyperinflation. We will get an issue where resources are not available to people. They understand this. This is why the Federal Reserve is so desperate right now. And I'll tell you something else. The Federal Reserve is pushed up against the wall this week. We're going to hear from the Fed this week. And the Federal Reserve is getting hard pressed to say, hey, why are they not moving rates at all if everything is just so great and everything is just so fine? The market is going to say, hey, what is going on? Do the Federal Reserve, do these world central banks really have control over what's going on here? Or have they actually lost control and this is just some kind of a sideshow? I believe they have no control. They're trying to talk the market higher. They're trying to suppress interest rates. They're doing a lot of backdoor things, requiring banks to buy debt. This has been going on for quite a long time, exposing shareholders to a toxic asset. So their level of desperation should tell us all, really, that we have to be close to something. Close meaning, I don't know, a week, a month, a day, a year. But it doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of things, I hope they can continue this longer. This way we can bet against the debt by hoarding a hard asset, become our own central bank once again by holding a hard asset, and take advantage of this because the Wall Street banks are going to do it. They're going to be taking advantage of all of this when this rolls over. There's no doubt about it. This is going to be the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world when everything corrects to fair value. So just understand it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. And just take advantage of the present state of affairs, period.
Now, you mentioned hard assets and gold and silver, and I noticed since December, moving forward to today, gold has gone up because back in December we were down at like 1050, and now we're at what is it, 1240, something around that area. So gold has gone up, and every time they do a flash, crash of gold, it seems at this point that they can just barely bring it down, but it pops right back up. Why do you think this is happening right now?
I think a lot of people are realizing how fraudulent this is, and I think you're referring to the $2 billion worth of contracts that were dumped onto the market last week. Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring to? That? Yeah, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Some entity out there dumped $2 billion worth of paper contracts onto the market using a market order, which is unheard of. Meaning, whoever dumped those shares onto the market was willing to take anything for it. So it's fake. We understand that they're going to try to continue to do this, and the market is starting to get hip to that. Look, investors, traders understand that these assets are suppressed, and again, it's the environment that we're in. We're still in that risk-on environment. This is going to turn to a risk-off environment. When we turn to risk-off, which is going to happen again, this is cycles. We go to risk-on, risk-off, risk-on, risk-off. It's like it oscillates. So when we get to the risk-off, which we may be getting there now. We're getting very close because look at the action of precious metals. Look at the action of the bond market here. Look at the action of the stock market lately. We're going to see bond yields rise because the market will dictate value at one point. It's not going to be the Fed that's going to be able to just continue to buy these things. Understand, the Federal Reserve is still buying debt. They have to do this. The Federal Reserve can't just say they're going to suppress interest rates or keep interest rates low. They have to take cash, print it out of thin air, and buy bonds with it. So that's how they suppress rates. So QE never stopped. It's still going on. People don't understand this concept. They think the Federal Reserve can just say, hey, you know what? We're going to keep interest rates low. They can't just say it. They have to get into the market and make it happen. So this is continuing. And again, lots of other things are going on as well. But the main thing we need to understand is this risk on will turn to risk off. And when that risk off environment occurs, we're going to get a rising in the debt market. Yields will rise. When yields rise, it makes stocks look less attractive. So there comes the risk off. When that happens, you get the sell off in the stock market. You get cash leaving other assets, and they're going to seek a place to go. And they're trying to do that now. The market is trying to say, hey, you know what? Look over here. Gold and silver, very undervalued assets. Let's start putting cash there. And this is just the beginning. I mean, this is going to, in my opinion, when we do go to the risk-off environment, set us up for prices with regard to gold and silver that I think very few of us can have a handle on. It'll be multiples of what we have right now.
And we understand that gold and silver have been manipulated because Deutsche Bank is now implicated in manipulation. Do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg? Do you think they're the only bank, and I think it was Nova Scotia was also involved, and maybe USB was involved in this also, and they were going to name others. Do you think they're the main manipulators, or do you think it's a lot larger than this?
It's monumentally larger than this. They're all doing it. They're all doing it in collusion with their respective central bank. And the sad part of this, Dave, is no one is going to get in trouble for it. No, nothing's going to happen. They never do. They can do whatever they want. They can manipulate, they can twist. Because again, who's doing the biggest manipulating and twisting of them all? It's the central banks themselves, which have turned the financial system upside down in order to keep this propped up. And that's what bothers me the most about this whole thing. Because again, when this whole thing comes down, this is, in my opinion, being done deliberately. Because what are they trying to do? The governments are trying to consolidate power here in the United States. look, even the millennial people out there, or the younger generation than that, they want bigger government. They don't want a smaller government. They're all looking for a handout. This is what they're setting up. There's going to be this wealth transfer scheme that's going to play out. The middle class will be crushed, absolutely crushed. And what are they going to do? They're going to look to the government for help. I mean,
Yeah.
are you kidding me?
Yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah.
no, they're not going to be able to help. I mean, there'll be a point in time where people are going to have to look inward instead of looking outward for help. And I don't think the government at this point is going to be able to help.
No, they're not going to be able to help. But the people are going to look for help because they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
Most people, sadly, walk around in such a dumbed down state, unable to really walk and chew gum at the same time, that when this occurs, they are going to be so lost. They're going to look for answers from anywhere. And I can promise you this, they already have it set up. The government already has a plan for when all of this comes down, because it will. The Federal Reserve has embarked on this QE into infinity program with no way out, no exit, other than a complete reset of the system, which will leave the middle class completely wiped out.
So, what do you think the meeting was about with Yellen and the president? And I know there were other bankers and finance minister. Why do you think all of a sudden they needed this emergency meeting? You think they were discussing how great the economy was?
Oh, exactly. I'm sure that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I think they were talking about how they can keep the scheme going till after the election. That is what they look. Again, what do people do? People look towards the stock market to gauge the health of everything. They don't care about anything else. They don't look at any other metric other than what's the Dow Jones Industrial Average doing today. So if the Dow Jones Industrial Average starts to take a hit and people's 401k plans start to take a hit and their investments start to take a hit, they're going to say, wait a minute, what's going on? The party in power must not be doing such a good job. So what they're doing here is colluding. Again, the Fed chairperson serves at the pleasure of the president. And they are colluding, which they have been for quite a long time, to figure out what they can do to continue to prop this up. I would be willing to bet the president said, don't even dream of raising interest rates. Every talk you give better be very dovish, because we do not want this market selling off. We can't allow that to happen. But, how far can it go, Dave? I don't know. I don't know really if it's going to fall tomorrow, the next week, the next month. But I can promise you that they have other things in store for us that are going to make our heads spin around for those of us that have a clue. Who knows what it'll be? I don't know what kind of thing they're going to come up with, but they're going to try to keep propping it up. But all it's going to do is make the financial Frankenstein even worse and distort asset prices even worse and make the inevitable correction to fair value, not real collapse, but correction to fair value, which will seem like a collapse, really just try to push it off, but it can't go on forever. It's impossible.
Every time we think we're coming to the point where, okay, the Fed has no more ammunition, they come up with these ridiculous schemes, and we're just like, whoa, now they're doing, QE plus, whatever XYZ. I can't believe they're doing this, and they just continue on with it. Now, the ECB is going to be buying corporate debt, and it looks like they're continually propping up the entire EU with all of this because you have negative interest rates out there. They have money printing out there. Now they're buying corporate debt. And it seems like this is just continually going on nonstop.
Well, that's what they're going to continue to do, Dave. There's no doubt about it. It's part of the scheme. They're going to keep doing things like that. The Federal Reserve, I have no doubt that is also embarking in, not is involved in buying the stock market overtly. I really think that's going on. I think if we were to research into the Federal Reserve, they're probably buying stock right now to try to keep this propped up, and they're hiding it somewhere. I don't know. But again, they're so desperate to keep this propped up that they're going to do things that we can't even believe. We can say, oh my God, how is this happening? Why are governments allowed to buy corporate debt? That's,
Right.
So this is the collusion between governments and the corporations. And what's that called? That's called fascism, right? So,
Yep.
Look, this thing is just so ugly and so distorted that when the inevitable correction to fair value happens, people are going to be so blindsided. The regular people, not people like you and your audience out there who got a clue. But that's what scares me the most. People, I have no doubt, will be rioting in the streets in every corner of the world, especially here in the United States, where I believe the population is probably the most dumbed down of them all.
Yeah, they're not going to know what hit them. I mean, they're going to be blindsided, a lot of the people out there, and they're not even going to realize what's going on until they lose their job. They see their retirement, disappearing. They can't access their bank accounts, and they're going to be sitting there going, what's going on here? And
Yeah,
that's what I worry about most is that people becoming very afraid and scared and doing things out of fear. And if you have a couple of million of them, that's what I'm most nervous about.
exactly. That's where we are now, one nation under surveillance, why the police have been militarized in every state in the union, why the world will become Baltimore when this whole thing comes down. People are going to turn into animals. They're going to go into survival mode. They're going to go, what am I going to do? I have to feed my kids. I have to do this. You always have to look at things from a worst case scenario. You have to. If it doesn't get there, well, that's fine. But I can't imagine how this is not going to unfold, if not in a worst case scenario, in a very close to a worst case scenario.
When everything starts to fall apart and people are saying, okay, the market's coming down, we're already seeing gold move up. And when people start buying more gold, how fast do you think gold is going to increase?
That's interesting. We could see some very large moves. I would not be surprised to see that at one particular time. And then what are they going to do? They're going to try to keep suppressing it through any kind of method they can think about, dumping contracts onto the market, paper contracts onto the market, using market orders. It's just so incredible. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. We're going to probably see at one particular time maybe $100, $200 moves with regard to gold. Silver is going to make incredible moves. Again, trying to normalize the ratio here. We're at 70 something to 1 at this particular time. It's going to be incredible, absolutely epic. And that's why I still believe that silver is the most undervalued asset in the history of the world.
I mean, people ask me a lot, and I say, look at the gold and silver market. Do you think that's a sign when we're seeing moves like at, $100 an ounce or $50 an ounce that something is breaking at this point?
I absolutely, I do think we're seeing that. The dollar will still remain under pressure. I think that trend's going to continue. I think we're going to see gold and silver continue to gain here. And again, when the market starts to turn into this risk off thing, that's when we're going to start seeing large moves in the price of precious metals. And I think large moves with regard to bond yields. And that's going to really spook the market. We had a 10 basis point move in one day last week. I forgot what day it was. That's pretty profound when you got a move like that in the 10-year. It'll rattle the markets. People say, "Hey, what's going on here?" I think that's going to be the norm. We're going to see way more than that at one point when people realize that they're holding an asset, debt, which is worthless. It's not backed by anything. Can never be paid back. And it's just, again, it's so hard to put your head around this entire thing like that. But all we have to know is it is not sustainable. Nothing that we're looking at, whether it's even the suppressed price of metals, is not sustainable. The debt market is not sustainable. The stock market is not sustainable. Housing, all of this. Even the job market that we have now is not sustainable. All of this, people are going to lose jobs, like you were saying before. We're going to turn into almost like a third world country, probably worse than that at one point. Maybe it could actually turn into who knows what, martial law at one point. They're going to be ready for it. There's no doubt about it. Again, this goes back to my premise of why. Why are the police being militarized in every state in the union? Military tactics, military weapons, military training. Why? They know something is coming. And they're going to say, oh, well, it's terrorism. We got to be ready for the terrorists. But look, they're ready for the American people to start to wake up. It's not the terrorists. It's the American people they're waiting for.
Greg, at this point, since we're talking about things, falling apart and the economy coming crashing down, what would you tell people to do to prepare at this point?
Well, a lot of things. You need again, think of things. What will happen to you in a worst case scenario if you have to, Protect yourself. Number one, if you need to secure your family, secure where you live. The number one thing you got to understand that people, their system is failing, and the proof is in front of everyone. All the stuff we're talking about, the desperation of world central banks. Don't hold their paper. Their paper isn't even yours. It's not. We don't own it. It's theirs, and it's owed back to them plus interest that they print out of thin air. It's the greatest scheme in the history of the world for them. For us, we need to be holding hard assets from a financial standpoint. It's the greatest trade in the history of the world. I trade these markets. I'm in them every single day, trading day. But again, even for myself, what do I do with my profits? I turn that into hard assets. I understand where this is, where we're going here. So, from a financial standpoint, that's what you need to do. You also have to think about, I'm not the guy to ask for from a prepping standpoint, but it wouldn't be a bad idea for people to start getting involved in learning about how to prep a little bit here, maybe getting together with like-minded people and talk about these issues. Now's the time to start talking about it. Not in a week, not in a month, but now, because we do not know, and there's no way to tell when this whole thing and what black swan or what triggering event is going to occur that's going to start this thing spiraling. There's no way to tell what it will be. We just know it's going to be at one point.
Greg, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
Go to my website, traderschoice.net. Everything I have is there. My videos are posted there. I have a nice chat room there now for people, like-minded people, to want to get together and talk. Traderschoice.net. That's where to go.